I love you, I love you, I love you. Until I love you, I love you, I love you. Until I find the way, the only words I know that you. Until I say the only words I know that you. Until I
know you see it, girl. This ain't sitting real good in my soul. Everywhere this little girl goes, she pick up another obstacle. She was my heart. I don't know the tribe or the fall, but by default, she don't think of me. I thought she was an Indian. She be slanging things like a simian. All my life I wanted me an Indian. Now she's far away, but I had to know. Listen, I know you see it, girl. This ain't sitting real good in my soul. Everywhere this little girl goes, she pick up another obstacle. She was my heart. I don't know the tribe or the fall, but by default, she don't think of me. I thought she was an Indian, but she be slanging things like a simian. All my life I wanted me an Indian. Ooh, girl, let me in. In the street with a wedding ring, and she hit the bar, city babe, are you down to cheat? He looked in the eye, chivalry, is he really dead? He pulled out a tip, jumping right on him, thinking wasn't good to intervene, and I lost her to the world and the girls and the posters. Entertained, I died of the pain and it cost her. I ain't mad at me, but it hurt, and I thought she wasn't in it. Now she only worried about the Benjamins. She been looking in my dreams. I swear that eyes on me, but not at all. I swear that eyes on me. I swear that eyes on me. I swear that eyes on me. I swear that eyes on me.
until I need you, I need you, I need you. I need to make you see what you mean to me. Until I do, I'm hoping you will know what I mean.
We come into this world unknown, but know that we are not alone. They try to knock us down, but change is coming. It's our time now.
Hey, everybody loses it. Everybody wants to throw it all away sometimes. And hey, yeah, I know what you're going through. Don't let it get the best of you. You'll make it out alive. Oh, people like us, we gotta stick together. Keep your head up, nothing lasts forever. Here's to the damned, to the lost and forgotten. It's hard to get high when you're living on the bottom. We are all misfits living in a world on fire. Sing it for the people like us, the people like us.
Hey, this is not a funeral. It's a revolution after all. Your tears have turned into rain.
the people like us, the people like us. You just gotta turn it up loud when the flames get higher. Sing it for the people like us, the people like us. They can't do nothing to you, they can't do nothing to me. This is the life that we choose, this is the life that we lead. So throw your fists in the air, come out if you dare. Tonight we're gonna change forever. Everybody loses it.
Everybody wants to throw it all away sometimes.
Oh, people like us, we gotta stick together. Keep your head up, nothing lasts forever. Here's to the damned, to the lost and forgotten. It's hard to get high when you're living on the bottom. We are all misfits living in a world on fire. Sing it for the people like us, the people like us. You just gotta turn it up loud when the flames get higher. Sing it for the people like us, the people like us. We are all misfits living in a world on fire. Sing it for the people like us, the people like us. You just gotta turn it up loud when the flames get higher. Sing it for the people like us, the people like us.
It's UUCC Zoom-In Live with extra special guest, David Kantor. Here are your co-hosts, Will Barrett and Claudia Victoroff.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the UUCC Zoom-In Live series finale. Will, how you doing?
I'm feeling pretty good. And yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Excited for a fun show.
I am as well. It's going to be a very interesting episode.
It's going to be an interesting episode.
If I do say so myself. A quick reminder for the people to please use the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to announce yourself. And make sure you send it to everybody and not just the panelists. As much as we love y'all, we want everybody to hear what you guys have to say. And your fellow congregants want to know you're here as well.
If you've been with us before, thanks for coming back. And if this is your first time with us, we're glad you're here. You chose quite an interesting show to join us for because it's the last one. Will and I will be interviewing none other than David Kantor, our show's founder and usual host. Be aware this show might run a bit late tonight because we have a lot of great content for you. And while we may be wrapping up the show, remember that if you've missed an episode or part of a show that you want to check out, many of the episodes are up on the UUCC YouTube channel. There are some episodes that are still missing due to using music without permission, but they'll get there eventually.
They'll eventually get there as soon as David learns how copyright laws work.
Copyright infringement, I guess it matters.
He should take a word from Walt Disney about those laws. And speaking of jokes, we've established the Jack Ullman comedy moment where we hear some jokes from Jack. Unfortunately, he ain't here with us tonight, but we want to take a moment to thank him for the wonderful laughs throughout the duration of the show. So that said, thanks, Jack. You know, you might not be here, but your work is appreciated very much. Yes. And if you see him around, whether it's virtual or in person, make sure to show him how much you appreciate his presence on this show.
In lieu of Jack's jokes, we're going to take some time to read through some special content before David joins us. If you're a regular attendee of Zoom-In Live, you may have received an email from me prompting you to say a few kind words about David in the show. Well, after editing out all the swear words, we still have some good testimonials. So, well, you want to alternate with me in reading some of these off? And
All
don't worry,
right.
if you don't hear your testimonial, they will all be sent to David at the end of the show. But for the sake of time, we have to be a little brief. All right,
right,
so here
start
it
us
begins.
off,
From
Claudia.
Cat White. I'm grateful to David for creating a way for us to know each other better and be connected when it was easy to feel lonely.
All right, all right. And this one here is from Don Arrington. David provided me with a place and space to speak my truth and let others hear it.
Del
I think,
Salvas. Oh, are you
I
reading
think
from,
an F-bomb was dropped, and that's okay, because wherever David Kantor is, there's probably a good reason to drop one.
from Del Salza? Dave brought us closer together during the long and difficult pre-vaccine COVID months and beyond. Being able to laugh together and learn about each other was something that I found really helpful.
And this next one is from Jan Devereaux. Sorry if I butchered your name. David, you really put yourself out there for us. Try something new and created a vehicle that worked to keep us together during a challenging time. You enabled us to get to know better many members of our congregation.
Mary Schman. COVID has thrown much of church life into chaos, but brought us some special gifts too. One special way we continue to deepen our connections was through what David created, UUCC Zoom-In Live.
And this one is from Tad Pinkston. I see a lot of David. I was unsure if I could handle more David in my life. You and I both. Against all odds, his charm and wit while hosting Zoom-In Live allowed me to endure yet more of my friend David Kantor.
From Tom McKenna, you and your guests made us laugh and made us think. Thanks for creating and presenting UUCC Zoom-In Live. It was a wonderful and unique way to keep us closer during the pandemic.
And from Jackie Stimper, the show provided some much needed glue for our community.
I think we need to do just a couple more. I am going to read Joanne Orr's. Dear Dave, with Zoom-In Live, you have given me a valued connection to my religious community. I am so grateful to you.
And I'll read off Mark Weber's to wrap us up on this part, since his is so very elaborate. One of the few things David Kantor learned in synagogue religious school: the Dodger rag, the other teams, what are they? Little pink elephants stuffed with hay. The Dodgers, what are they? The best damn team in the USA. There you go.
I do actually want to read Mary Ellen McNulty's. David really loved doing Zoom-In Live for his congregation. He gave his heart and soul putting something together that he hoped would be another way to keep our community together during the pandemic. I think he succeeded. Love you, David. If you didn't hear your note, don't fret. He'll be receiving all your kind words after the show.
And speaking of David, without further ado, our extra special guest tonight is the creator and host of UU Zoom-In Live, David Kantor. You may already know him, but just in case. David has been around First U and UUCC parts for 30-some years. Sheesh. Since him and his wife moved here, and their kids as well. He was a founding member of the 20s and 30s group, has taught both youth and adult education, was on the First Unitarian board twice, and now on the UUCC board, and served as treasurer and president. That covers about 17% of his involvement. We'll learn about more directly from him, because this man got a rap sheet. So with that said, please join us in welcoming David Kantor to UUCC Zoom-In Live.
Yay!
Snazzy looking fellow.
Hi, David.
I don't have your natural good looks, Will, so I need to dress up to try to compete at least a little bit.
I'm just trying to get like you, man.
Thanks for being here, David. How does it feel to be on the other side of the script?
More than a little bit strange. I mean, you guys made me wear this monkey suit and stuff, so
now we forced you into it. How you doing tonight, David?
I'm feeling pretty good. It's that weird feeling of happiness and sadness. Happy about being part of something that ended up being, I think, meaningful. I mean, I'm grateful for a lot of the comments. I actually was sitting here kind of blushing a little bit, and that's hard to make me do.
That's why we did it when you were off screen.
And that's kind of wise on your part to do that. But on the other hand, it's good news for our congregation. And basically, when we created the show, we thought we were going to do it until it wasn't needed anymore. And my projection right now is that's likely not going to be needed anymore. So it's a good time to wrap it up. So it's a kind of mixed feeling.
Very much so. So, as we've already established, a lot of people know you here, including me and Claudia ourselves. And a lot of people here have heard your story. But for the people who aren't too familiar with you and your life, let's talk a bit about your personal history. So, give us a little bit of info about where you're from and your family structure growing up.
So I'm from New York City. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I was raised by my mother with my two older sisters. My dad died when I was 2 years old, so I never knew him. In fact, as I understand it, he was sick almost the entire time that I was alive. And so I have zero memories of the man. And so my mother and my two older sisters raised me. And in fact, I think when my sister is on tonight. I have one sister who's still alive. One passed away several years ago. So I think my sister Susan is here tonight. Susan, are you here? Hi.
You get a message from Deborah Gus.
Oh, my niece Deborah is here as well. And I have a couple other relatives here. I'll drop their names over the course of the evening. But Susan gets some of the blame or credit for whatever the hell I turned out being. She is my two older sisters. And there's Susan Hutchison right there. Hi, Susan.
Hello, you look really good.
Why, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
See, I told you I sent her a check and it would pay off. So there you go. So thank you.
Go. So as most of us know, David did not grow up Unitarian Universalist. He grew up practicing Judaism. So please give the people a little more information about the significance that held in your life growing up.
I was born and raised Jewish. I think generations before mine were, in Judaism, there's Orthodox, Conservative, Reformed, and probably 9 other kind of different ways of thinking about it now. Back when I was growing up, there's only 3 of them. And I think generations before mine were truly, truly Orthodox. One of my grandfathers, not the one named Kantor, but my other grandfather was a cantor in a synagogue. But my mother sent me to an Orthodox yeshiva. Yeshiva is like a parochial school for Jewish people. And basically spend half your day in a little bit more than half your day in Hebrew studies and the half the day in English studies, learning math and science and stuff like that. And it was a very challenging period for me because really I was not being raised Orthodox at home. So if you were Orthodox, so for example, you wouldn't turn on a light on Saturday, you wouldn't go to the supermarket and do your food shopping, what have you. You'd always be wearing a skull cap or a yarmulke, stuff like that. We didn't do things like that. And so I went to yeshiva through 8th grade, and I spent the entire time I was going to yeshiva being terrified that people would find out that I wasn't really an Orthodox Jew like the rest of them. And I didn't know what would happen if that were ever to be found out. And so that was a pretty spooky part. And of course, it basically scared the religion out of me, if you will. And after I finished 8th grade and I ended up going to a regular high school, public high school, I really wanted as little to do with formal Judaism as possible. So I'd go to family functions, of course, people would be bar mitzvah, be weddings, friends, stuff, what have you. But I was one of those people who was finished up my 8th grade and said, oh, now I'm going to go to an Orthodox yeshiva high school and stuff like that. Well, goodness knows that he was part of my mother to send me there. There was a lot of push from some of the rabbis at my school for me to go to either the high school that was part of the yeshiva I was going to, or to another high school. I went to a pretty small high school. I remember my rabbi in the 8th grade, was a great guy, came to visit my mother twice and came to visit with her to basically say, look, I get that he's too big a fish for the size of our pond, but there are a lot of other, this is New York City, there are a bunch of yeshiva high schools. And then he really was urging her, send me to one of those. And in the end, thank goodness, ultimately with a little help from my eldest sister, Corinne, may she rest in peace, and my stepfather, who was a total jerk in general, but it was okay on this one. My mother ended up yielding to my pleas to have me go to a normal high school. So that's a pretty ugly religion story, but there you have it.
Speaking of school, tell us more about your educational journey.
My educational journey. So I was in yeshiva through 8th grade, so that's where I learned a little bit of Yiddish. I still know an occasional random word here or there. At one point, I was semi-fluent in Yiddish at one point, but not anymore. And then I went to a public high school in New York City. I went to a public high school that actually, I was in the second year that it opened. So the first year it opened only had a sophomore class, and I went the next year as a freshman. So that year there's only 3 grades, freshmen, sophomore, and juniors. And so I was there as a school evolved basically. I went through high school there, met my oldest and best friend there. He's here tonight also. Hi, Don, how you doing, man? Glad you're here. And met him the first day I guess it was in history. It was in world history class or world geography taught by Mr. Spector, and Don was in those days trying his best to not show how smart he was. And we became friends the first day there and been friends ever since. And to this day, he's still trying to show that, but he can't fool me. So I went there through high school. I didn't think much. I was a very young 18 when I finished high school. And the idea about going away from school for college spooked the dickens out of me. And as it happened, there was a very good college, part of the City University of New York system, a block away. So it was actually closer to my house than my high school was. I had to go through the college to get to my high school. And so, yeah, no joke, right? It's a pretty wild thing. And so I went to the school that I guess is still ranked in the top quarter of all liberal arts schools around. And went there for college and grew up a little bit there. And then went from there to graduate school. I went to graduate school in Philadelphia and got my MBA at the Wharton School and stopped my education. I mean, I like to think I'm still learning every day, but my formal education stopped there. I toyed around a couple of times the idea of getting a PhD a couple of times because I'm really interested in international healthcare systems, but never had enough to actually get going on it. So I never did that.
All right. That's pretty groovy.
So Will, there will be a pop quiz for you and all this stuff later, Will. So you have to remember my 8th grade rabbi's name, okay?
Oh man, I already get enough quizzes at school. Don't add more onto it.
You should be in total practice then.
Yeah, you're ready to study and take tests.
Oh Lord, have mercy. Carrying on. So, as most people have already seen, you have a lot of family members present here, including your wife, and I believe one of your children are currently present.
Well, definitely one of them.
Yeah, one of them is present for sure. Oh, both are present.
Both are here.
Philip just let his presence be known. So tell us a bit about your family now, and the stuff that people don't already know about. Tell us more about how you and Mary Ellen came to be and to birth these beautiful children of yours.
So, well, I'm not going to explain the birds and the bees to you, Will. I'm sorry. I'll leave that to your mother to deal with you or your father to handle with you. Although I have to remember. So remember, I was raised by a mother. And so I remember when I was like 13 or 14 years old, asking her about this. And my mother was a very quiet woman and not one for many words. And if you wanted to have a picture of a Sphinx, a total deaf mute, that was my mother then, deer in a headlight. So, but never mind. But Will, I'll handle this with you offline since Mom and Dad have not.
Hey, Liz said that she taught me out, so I think I've learned to know how human reproduction.
One of the Cantors has already taught Will about the birds and the bees.
And she learned it all from Mary Ellen McNulty, so it must all be true. So Mary Ellen and I met. We both worked for the same healthcare consulting and computer services firm. And true story, so I went to work with this firm as their director of marketing. I was the first employee in their corporate office, which was, I didn't realize then about how controversial having a corporate office was in this organization. And I saw Mary Ellen's picture in one of the company newsletters, and I said, I have got to meet that woman. all true. And so my boss and I did a couple of trips to some of the offices, and Mary Ellen worked one of those. She was one of the two VPs in one of the offices. And my boss at the time was a guy named Mike. And Mike was more than a little bit of a nudge. If he was somebody who would irritate you, like poke and poke and poke. I do it jokingly. Mike was just naturally this way. And so Mike was asking Mary Ellen for a bunch of reports. And Mary Ellen was running a regional office, and she was basically running around with like hair on fire all day long. And so we're there to meet with the guy who's the guy who's running the office and the two VPs. And we go to visit with Mary Ellen at the appointed time. And Mary Ellen has got 6 things going on. And so Mike says, "Hey, Mary Ellen, you got those reports for me that I asked you about?" And Mary Ellen says to him, Mike, no, I got a bunch of client issues here. Today's not looking so good, and tomorrow ain't either. And then she turns around to me and she says, her first words to me, "If you were put on this earth to make my life miserable, you could leave right now too." And I thought,
Yes.
you want to know from miserable lady? I'm going to marry you and show you what miserable is. And alas, I succeeded in that.
That is a hilarious way to end up in a long-term relationship with somebody.
So we started off long distance. I was in Chicago at the time, and she was in Amherst, Massachusetts, in the western part of the state. And so we had a long distance relationship first, and then we got serious. And eventually she yielded and fell victim to my alleged charms and moved to Chicago. Just because there were jobs there. It's mostly because of me, because there were jobs in Chicago, allegedly. And as time went on, we said, yeah, this might work out. And of course, I got the better of that deal. We all know that. I got the better of that deal. And after being together for a while and doing things that Liz explained to you, Will, our son Philip came along, and then Liz came along 2.5 years later or something like that. And so, or almost 3 years later. And so for those of you who don't know, I have a son, Philip, who is now 36 years old. And my daughter, Liz, who is producing this show tonight, is about 3 years younger. And they're both married. Phil married a wonderful lady named Erica, and doing those same things that Mary Ellen and I did. They have 2 kids right now. My adorable 3-year-old granddaughter, Zoe, and my 1-year-old grandson, who is going to grow up to become the Incredible Hulk. His name is Sam. And Liz is married to this wonderful guy named John, who you may have heard in the background on an occasional show towards the end. And Phil and Erica and the kids live in Boston, outside of Boston, in a place called Brookline. And Liz and John live in Houston. And they were all in town a couple of weeks ago. Liz got married last year, but she just came to town, and Phil was the officiant, and they got married here in town a year ago, June, but never had any of their parties and stuff. And so Liz was in town a couple of weeks ago for her wedding shower, and Phil and Erica were in town then also. And so we had some time, a chance to spend some time together. That was lovely. Mary Ellen and I had visited Phil and Erica and the babies a few weeks earlier, and we had been with Liz and John a couple of weeks after that. And Mary Ellen, in fact, right now, as we speak, Mary Ellen right now is in Boston visiting with Phil and Erica and the babies. So I'm jealous of her being able to do that right now, but I'm glad she is.
Let's talk a little bit. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean
I was going to say that's pretty dope that you guys are able to be keeping up with the grandkids, even with COVID going on.
Wait a second. I don't want to say we're keeping up with them. Let's be clear about this. So one of the things that happened while Phil and Erica were here, Phil left town for a few days, and we were at my lake house. I have a lake house out of Vermillion. And Phil left town for a few days, and we were at the lake house, and it was Erica, Mary Ellen, and me with Zoe and Sam. So 3 able-bodied adults with reasonably sound minds and 2 little kids. And it is safe to say that the 2 little kids outnumbered the 3 of us, and it wasn't even close.
Oof.
Yeah. So I would never say that we kept up with them. They'd go to bed. Erica would put them to bed by 7:30, and that hour could not come soon enough, because we basically would all fade away after that very, very quickly.
Let's talk a little bit about your career journey now, David. I know that you knew my grandpa, Victor Victoroff, at Huron. I don't really know what you were doing at Huron, why you were both there. Could you tell us a little bit about the jobs you've had and what your career journey has looked like?
Yeah, so I started off after I got my MBA. The idea of working in the private sector really didn't appeal to me all that much. The idea of just doing stuff to make money for people wasn't a big grabber for me. So I went to work for a public benefit agency in New York called the New York State Power Authority. So basically, there's a lot of hydroelectric power that's generated by Niagara Falls. And it helps basically support the aluminum industry there. Alcoa Reynolds, those guys who need gobs of electricity to basically make aluminum. And so I went to, so the Public Benefit Corporation was created way back when to corral that power. So I went to work for that place. I had one of the best titles for a job in the universe. I don't care what titles you've heard for a job. My title back then was power analyst. So, so unlike what you're thinking, Will, I wasn't rating, okay, so let's see, could Batman take Spider-Man? How's the Thor go up against Superman? And it wasn't that kind of analysis, but it was a power analyst job. I was there for less than a year. Then I ran to Chicago. I chased a lady, and unfortunately, I caught her for a while. Which was not the best news in the world, but I ended up in Chicago. I was a trucker for a while. I worked for Allied Van Lines for about 4 years. And then I got this job working for this computer and consulting services firm in Chicago. And I almost didn't get that job. So in fact, at first I didn't get that job. So I was ready to leave Allied Van Lines. Allied Van Lines was a 14-karat crap show. Top to bottom. I had 8 bosses in less than 4 years. Now it's one of the lucky ones. I actually got some good experience there, but I needed to get out of there. And there was this job for this firm called Amherst Associates that needed a director of marketing. So I applied for the job, and I was one of the final 2 candidates, and I did not get the job. And so this goes back 1,000 years when people would still talk like this. You couldn't own up to it these days. And the guy who ended up becoming my boss said, look, sorry, it was very, very close. And in the end, we decided we didn't have enough women in our management teams. We chose her instead of you because we wanted another woman in the management team. And so I went crap and started and went back to work. So I'm looking for other jobs. And I don't know, 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, I get a phone call. And it's this guy, it's Mike. And says, well, the job came open. Would you like to come to work for us? And I said, yes. And so I found out later that this lady was from Los Angeles, was going to be moving to Chicago. And the day the moving truck came, literally, she'd been packed up. The moving truck came to move her stuff. And she went, holy crap, although she used a different 4-letter word, and said, I can't leave Los Angeles. My family and my friends are all here. And she sent the moving truck away.
Oh my God.
Up, right. And so, okay, that's
Wow.
that's a real holy shit moment.
Talk about a last-minute decision.
And she ended up not taking the job. And so Mike called me up and said, hey, you want the job? Now, that experience, you talk about what things influenced your life. That was one of those major, right? You know, anything about forks in the road and stuff like that, all these books and novels and movies about this stuff. This is one of those major ones for me because 1, it got me into healthcare. And 2, if I hadn't gone there, I think the odds were pretty good I was not going to meet Mary Ellen McNulty. So,
oh yeah,
those
double whammy.
Yeah. So, I went to work for Amherst Associates, and I got the healthcare bug, and I realized that was the place where I wanted to work. So I worked at Amherst for about 4 years. Worked for another firm for a couple of years. Decided I really wanted to stay in healthcare. If I was going to stay in healthcare, I needed to go to work in a hospital for a while, and so Muriel and I were married. Philip was around, and we moved to Cincinnati. I had 4 job options, and we chose to go to Cincinnati. We went to Cincinnati instead of going to Washington, D.C. or San Diego. Like, how dumb can you be, right? But the best job was in Cincinnati. And as it happened, Mary Ellen wanted, the deal was that Mary Ellen go back to school, get her MBA. She got a free ride to the University of Cincinnati. So we spent 10 of the longest years of our lives in those 2 years at Cincinnati. I hope there's nobody on this thing who loves Cincinnati, because it would be safe to say that Mary Ellen and I were not huge fans. I remember my eldest sister, Corinne, who taught grade school, when we said we were moving from Chicago to Cincinnati, asked me, so let's see, you're going to Cincinnati. That's right beside Oklahoma, right? So that was my sister. Yeah. And so we moved to Cincinnati. I worked for this hospital system for a couple of years, got some great experience there for a couple of years. And then as Mary Ellen was finishing up her MBA, we looked at each other and said, we got to get the hell out of Dodge. We cannot stay here. And so we started looking for jobs. And in the end, I knew I wasn't a good fit in that organization or that community. And I got let go a few weeks before I got the job offer here in Cleveland. And we went through this awful weekend. We had choices of either coming to Cleveland, going to Boston, or going to Chicago, going back to Chicago. And Mary Ellen and I love Chicago. Mary Ellen was from Boston. We didn't know anything about Cleveland. And we spent a miserable weekend deciding where to move until finally, and I had to make a decision because Cleveland wanted to know what I was going to do. And finally, 5 o'clock on Monday morning, Mary Ellen said, let's put down a bunch of factors, things that big considerations. Let's see what that tells us. And it told us to come to Cleveland. And so here we came. Another one of those forks in the road. And it was a really, really good choice. So we came here. I went to work for a health system called Meridia Health System. I was hired to be their head of strategy and business development. And I did that. I was with Meridia for about 8 years. I ran the strategy group for about 3 years. And then I was asked to move over and become the president of Huron Hospital. And that's where I met your grandfather, Claudia. Your grandfather was the chief of psychiatry there. And I didn't know I was at Huron for a little bit under 3 years. And during those 3 years, I didn't know who needed to be a patient of that department more, me or Vic, but that's another story for another day. So I learned a lot about people, about organizations, about community during that 3-year period when I ran that hospital in that community, because that organization, while it was a healthcare provider, it was a huge, in the end, a huge social service agency and a huge employer in the community. So what was at stake there for that hospital was a whole lot more than just were they going to provide decent health care. I remember when I went there, my boss, the guy who was the board chair of the hospital, and my boss was the CEO of the health system, both said to me, we're going to leave your job at corporate open because we want you to spend 90 days at Huron and decide whether the hospital can be saved, whether or not we need to close it.
Oh, wow.
And I went there for my first 90 days, came up with a plan to save the hospital. They knew they had stacked the deck because I'm a business builder. I'm not a business cutter. And so they figured I heard about this later. Their thought process was, he's the best guy we've got in the organization to build business. If it can be saved by an insider, it's going to be him. Otherwise, we have to think about another alternative. And figured out a way to keep the place open, and it stayed open another 20 years. So I guess it wasn't the dumbest decision I ever made. And so I ran that place for about 3 years, and I left there a couple of years later. And at that point, I started my own consulting firm called Kantor Consulting Group. So that was an accident. When I left Meridia, I was going to take 6 months off and do nothing because my last couple of years had been a total nutcracker with the kinds of things we're involved in at Meridia, and I needed a break. So my plan was to take a 6-month break, just talk to people. I had ideas about, well, was I going to run a health system somewhere else? Was I going to go into investment banking, or was I going to venture capital? Was I going to go into consulting, working for one of the big time consulting firms? Was I going to run a not-for-profits? I had all these ideas. And so I started talking to folks, just chatting with people about stuff. And before I knew it, the phone started ringing. And people said to me, hey, David, since you're available right now, you want to give me a hand with blah, blah, blah? And one thing led to another, led to another, led to another. And before I knew it, I had a consulting practice. And I also had an offer for a really nice job with a large established consulting firm. And my genius wife pointed out to me, you've already got your own practice. Why do you got to go to work for somebody else? And I said, well, it'd be less risk if I work for somebody else. Mary Ellen said, you don't got to do that. Mary Ellen was working for Ernst & Young at the time, and she was making a crap load of money. She said, we have a safety net. Why don't you go give it a shot? And that was 25 years ago plus.
Oh, wow.
And so my genius wife had another great idea for me. And so I started Kantor Consulting Group in May of 1996. It's 25 years later.
All right. Well, I think it's time for your favorite moment of the show, David.
Oh,
Yes, sir. All right. So for the people that have been here before, you guys are pretty familiar with the Colbert lightning round. But for the people who aren't familiar, I'll give a very brief explanation before we go in. So basically, this portion was David's brainchild after watching the Colbert Show, and he interviewed a few celebrities and figured that you can learn more about a person by asking 15 simple questions. Well, we crunched for time, so we had to kind of downsize with the questions a bit. But this is pretty much a lightning round, and David has to think quick, can't dwell on any answers. So with that said,
Will, do I have to think as quickly as you did when I did the lightning round with you, and it went on for about 20 minutes? I'm just curious.
don't judge me. I like to take my time.
I'm just asking the question.
I'm the one asking questions.
The moment you've been waiting for, right? The moment you've been waiting for.
You're being interviewed, not me. Anyway, let's get into it. All right. So what phrase or words do you most overuse?
So and fuck.
Favorite movie genre?
Action movies.
Living person you most admire?
Barack Obama and Mary Ellen McNulty.
Living person you most despise?
Donald Trump.
Who is your celebrity crush, dead or alive?
Celebrity crush, dead or alive. Reese Witherspoon.
Favorite smell?
Favorite what?
Favorite smell?
Favorite smell. Oh, fresh cut grass.
What happens after we die?
So I want to believe it's like what the Buddhists think. And basically, if I've been a good person, I'll get recycled and come back as something else that's good. So I hope that's the case. But I fear that we basically die and we go into the ground and nothing happens.
Best concert you've ever attended?
The Rolling Stones with the first act of Stevie Wonder.
Historical figure you could beat in a fist fight?
James Madison, because there's only 5'1".
And last but not least, describe the rest of your life in 5 words.
Mary Ellen and my kids.
Aww.
Were you thinking about that one? That was a perfect answer.
He had that one in his back pocket.
I was not thinking about that one. I honestly, so for those of you who've seen the show before, you know that a number of the questions that were asked are ones that I asked. And I had thought that we might be doing the Colbert thing, but I thought the list of questions we have to choose from is like 40 plus. And I thought they were going to choose questions that I had never asked before. So I couldn't be prepared at all. So you surprised me by asking some questions that I already knew about, but I had not prepared any of them, no.
I wrote all the questions.
You have not asked before which historical figure you could beat in a fist fight.
That's a good
So
question, yeah.
we did shake it up.
I wrote the questions this time around. Claudia put me in charge of that.
Well, you did well, my friend.
I have
Thank
a
you.
friend who gauges people's like self-confidence by asking them how many coyotes they think that they could fight off with their bare hands. And I think that's a pretty good one to add to this list.
So
Don't give him any ideas.
there was there's a podcast called 538, which is mostly a political podcast. It's nonpartisan. They do a lot of things with data and stuff like that. And they actually did a show on one of their shows. They often ask a question about good use or bad use of surveys. And they had a survey about what animals did people think they could beat in a fight. And they had things like coyotes and bears and dogs and stuff like that. So coyotes may have been there. And amazingly, amongst American males, over half of American males think they could take out a coyote in a fight without any weapons, just one-on-one. I think
I could take one.
I'm sorry?
I think I could take one.
You can take one coyote?
Coyotes are relatively weak animals, so.
Dude, they're scrappy.
Oh yeah, they're like an angry toddler.
And they
You might get bit if you mess around.
So
David
we have
just
not yet
admitted
called.
You can't take an angry toddler. So
We have not yet called my son, my grandson Sam, a coyote. Haven't called him that yet. But he can be a fierce toddler at times.
So David, we have a few questions about you and UU. For the sake of time, I'm hoping we can keep this section a little brief so we can get to lots of our audience questions. I have 3 parts to this question. I'm just going to read them all out to you and you can give a little summary. So they are, how would you identify your religious identity now? What have you been involved in at first U and now UUCC that has been particularly satisfying? And what keeps you coming back to stay involved, besides the fact that Lori Albright and Don Stimbart are obviously blackmailing you?
Oof.
Well, I am unadulteratedly a Unitarian Universalist. There are some Jewish customs that I still follow, that I like to follow, like Passover, Seders, and Hanukkah, lighting candles and stuff like that. But I am a Unitarian Universalist. There's no bones about that. The things I found most meaningful along the way were facilitating the merger between the Society and First Unitarian. I thought that that was an important thing to do, and I'm glad I had the chance to basically be in the middle of all that. As an aside, one of the things that I do in my work life, many of you know I do strategy work and planning work. I do another thing as well. I facilitate not-for-profit mergers. I'm glad I was able to bring those skills to bear for the benefit of our congregation. And the other thing I really find meaningful is doing. I taught YRE for a lot of years. I did a lot of youth religious education stuff. I taught high school. I did babies. I did coming of age stuff like that. But what I find most meaningful, honestly, is doing a lot of the adult religious education. I'm teaching, I facilitate an adult credo class now with Melissa Vandergriff, and I find working on that and kicking things around with a group of our fellow adult congregants to be a very meaningful and thought-provoking thing for me. And I think the people who take the class find it to be meaningful as well. This was not meant to be a commercial, but just to tell everybody, we're going to be doing that class starting in the next few weeks, gang. So you got to be signing up for it very, very soon. Hint, hint, hint. It's very, very limited room for enrollment in that. Only 10 people are allowed to be in it. So get your dibs into Alan Georgia sooner rather than later. So I found that to be very, very meaningful. You had a third part to that question?
What keeps you coming back?
So a lot of my family is on this call. A lot of my blood family is on the show tonight, and I am forever grateful for all of them because of what I deem to be the incredible importance of family. And the reality is that I've not lived around my family for my entire adult life, but I value and cherish that group terribly. But beyond that, the reality is that this congregation is my extended family. I mean, if you were to ask Mary Ellen or any of the other people who are my close friends, they would all tell you that is the way that I look at it. You are my people. You know how we talk about dogs and dogs have a person? Well, you all are my people. It is the way I look at it. I am committed to this group of people. It's like a large extended family. Mary Ellen's father had like 10 brothers and sisters, so she's got a zillion cousins, some of whom she knew well, some of whom she barely knows at all. And same thing holds for me. I know some of you very, very well. Those of you I know kind of, some of you some of the other people I know barely at all, but you are my people. And I am committed to you just like as much as I'm committed to the rest of my family. It's the way I feel about it. There's no rational reason, no rational reason why I would do all the stuff I have done and spend the time I spend on now UUCC if I didn't feel that way. It's the way I feel. Will, you were going to say something?
I was saying, who's chopping onions in here?
Oh.
Lord have mercy.
But you're one of the people who knows that it's true. You and I have talked about this before. You know that it's true.
We've had several conversations about this before. For people who don't know, David considers me his other son.
I was going to ask who your favorite co-host is, but I think we all already know the answer to that one. I've got nothing on Will.
Claudia,
Claudia,
you are my favorite female co-host, just like Will is my favorite male co-host.
Wow.
He loves us both.
1 out of 1.
That is correct.
Yes. And with that said, for our last very special question, I know you've been waiting all season to answer this one. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
So I want to have, so this is going to sound really evil. And I promise you I'd use my powers only for good and not for evil. I would be a superhero, not a supervillain. I would want to have those kinds of mental powers where you could read people's minds and you could pass messages along telepathically, that you could shape people's minds and their thought processes, move things around with you focusing with your brain, cast illusions, those kinds of things. I'd want that superpower. That's the one I'd want to have.
That's a lot of different superpowers in one, David.
No, but it's all about about basically mental projection, mental power.
Okay.
That's what I want.
Please don't read my mind. Don't read my mind, because that whole thing about Liz teaching me out got my head spinning from some of those lessons.
Lori Albright just said that's terrifying. Lori, you don't have to worry about it. I already know how to read your mind, kiddo. Don't sweat it.
David Kantor's gonna be like Matilda on steroids, but as an adult man instead of a little child.
Call him Matildo. And all right. So with that said, we finna take a brief break to get all your questions together for David. If you have a question to ask, please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and ask it. Please do not use the chat button, because we're not finna look for it. Sorry. We'll get all that organized for you and answer your questions when we return. But first, our mid-show break with the song Help Me by Joni Mitchell, requested by our guest David in honor of Mary Ellen McNulty. See you in a few.
Help me, I think I'm falling. I've seen some hot blazes come down to smoke and ash. We love our loving, not like we love our freedom. Sitting there talking, or lying there not talking, didn't feel good. We danced with the
All right. That was Help Me by Joni Mitchell, selected for us by our very special guest, David Kantor, in honor of his wife, Mary Ellen McNulty. So sweet. Help Me was released on the 1974 album Court and Spark. It was Mitchell's biggest hit single and was in the top 10 hit list in June of 1974. And it was also ranked recently in the Rolling Stones top 500 songs of all time. Thanks, David, for that musical recommendation.
You're welcome. One of my faves. I love that album. So I'm not a huge Joni Mitchell fan, but I love that album.
Is
Of
Mary
course,
Ellen a huge Joni Mitchell fan?
probably more than me, but she's not goo goo gaga either. I mean, it's basically that. It's kind of funny. It's her most commercial album, it's her most successful album. So of course you couldn't do six more like it because that was not who Joni Mitchell was. And she took a lot of crap from a lot of her critics and fans for having quote unquote gone commercial. That was a hell of an album though. A lot of great songs on it.
That's the first Joni Mitchell song I ever heard, so that's a pretty groovy number right there. But enough about some Joni Mitchell, though. You ready to answer these questions, David?
I'm ready to answer questions.
All right. So our first question comes from Don Schwartz.
Don, you got to unmute yourself, man.
Okay, there I am. All right.
Those of you who don't know, Don Schwartz is my oldest and closest friend. He is actually my brother. He is my younger
Yes.
brother. He is 13 days younger than me. But those 13 days of youth translate to about 40 years of maturity. So imagine how young he actually is, given my maturity level. But
You
go
got-
on, Don, you have a question for me in public.
Well, I just want to know if your taste in music has improved.
Oh, coming straight for you.
Well, the answer is no. Well, Don is still living in 1958, except for the Beach Boys.
There you go.
And he was always a Beach Boy fan, and I was always a Four Seasons fan. And alas, he clearly had the more popular and more creative group than I did. But I could sing Four Seasons songs better than he could sing Beach Boy songs.
And did you tell him how we sang "My Girl" at a bar mitzvah?
Y'all be singing?
Oh, he was lead. It was the Cantrells, Kantor and the Cantrells.
There is truth to that.
And I have it on tape.
Is this going to be on the pop quiz?
There you go.
We have to remember the name of the group. Yes.
Oof, I'm going to get an F
So-
minus.
So I've got a story about being on tape about music. Don, I love you. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. Congrats.
So back when I worked for Meridia, first year I worked there, my boss comes to me and says, "Hey, you got to put together the entertainment for the holiday party for the board and the corporate office and other executives, what have you." I said, "Okay, how much is my budget?" He says, "Nothing." And so basically, we decide to do a karaoke thingy, basically. And I get the other senior execs together and some of my staff from my function. And we basically are doing songs. We do a Beach Boys song and a song by the Temptations, a couple other things. And then the wrap-up song is a Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell song, "Ain't No Mountain High Enough." And I am Tammy Terrell, complete with a feathered boa. So
Love to see that.
and
Did they have you in a
there
sparkly
actually is a
dress?
video of that. There actually is a video of that. And one of my staff people took that video and brought it to a public function I was at. That was a fundraiser, and basically had it up for bid so it would not be shown that day to everybody else. Yes.
Lori Albright's blackmailing got nothing on that, huh?
Mhm.
All right. Our next question is from Mary Ellen.
Hi,
Hi. How you doing, sweetie?
I'm doing fine, babe. How are you?
I'm doing great.
You should be so proud. All of you should be very proud. And Carol and Liz, all of you. So Dave, anything special? Any moment that you really remember from any of the shows that really stands out to you?
So the thing that pops out to my mind first and foremost was Don Stimpert's grandson. When Don Stimper was the guest, his grandson being in the audience and asking his grandpa, Grandpa, if you can only say 14 words for the rest of your life, what would they be? And totally out of nowhere. And Don, God bless him, took a run at it right then. And then finally said, he realized that was a pretty tough question. So he said to his grandson, I'll get back to you on this tomorrow. And Dan, if I didn't have an email from Don at 7 o'clock the next morning, he spent the time after the show thinking about it and sending an email back to his grandson. I thought that was a great.
That's great. I remember that. Okay, that was good. That's all I wanted is if you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ellen.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Love you.
Love you too.
All right, all right. Moving on. Our next question is from Allison Bashan.
Okay. Hi, David.
Hi, Allison.
Nice to see you. I'm seeing you from Philadelphia. I'm in Philadelphia for work, so I tuned in just to make sure I was here. But
thank you. I'm glad you're here tonight.
Thank you. I'm glad I am too. I have two questions actually, so I will ask both of them. First, the first question is, who is your favorite person or band to see in concert and why? And the second question is, what's the most important lesson you learned this past year?
So it's hard for me to not pick the Rolling Stones.
I agree. That's a good one.
I saw them 3 or 4 times. When I first saw them, it was when they're at their peak, you know, when Stevie Wonder was just getting hot. I saw them at Madison Square Garden. And Mick was a big time showman even then. And in the years afterwards, when I saw him, he was still a hell of a showman. So it's hard for me to not pick that, pick the Stones as my favorite group to see in concert. And important lesson from this past year. I guess I would say that I appreciate more and more the importance of community. You know, as one of the things that, remember, I never went to a house of worship before I came here. I mean, I went to an Orthodox synagogue for about 3 months before I was bar mitzvah, and that's it. So until I went here, I never was anywhere. And appreciating the range of folks that you could be around, and how if you put in the time and energy, you get all that much back and so much more, and how meaningful it ends up being, especially particularly in a time of pandemic. I'd say that would rank really way the hell up there for me.
Thanks.
Okay. So,
can I give Allison one more answer? I also learned there are a whole bunch of folks up there who are total jerks who, as far as I'm concerned, they want to get vaccinated. They could drop dead as far as I'm concerned, but that's another story.
Oof.
Oof. Series finale.
It's still PG-13. Can't say too much.
Oh, hey, I already dropped an F-bomb tonight.
An F-bomb was dropped. We passed PG-13 a while ago.
Okay, rated R. That works for me. All right, our next question comes from Lori Albright.
Hey, David Kantor.
Hi, Lori Albright.
Goodness, it is great to hear you this evening. I thought I knew a lot about you, but I learned a lot tonight, so that was pretty cool. My question has a 3-year time frame to it. So the question is, for our congregation, which you love so much and so do I, can you tell us one thing that you would like to see us do or engage in or get better at, or something else altogether, something that you'd like to see the congregation, you know, whatever, in the next 3 years?
So this is gonna surprise some of you, because you know that of all the things I have passion about for our congregation, justice is not necessarily one of them. And yet, if I were to look at one thing I'd like us to get better at, I'd like us to get better at doing justice work. I'd like us to be involved in meaningful stuff in ways in which our average congregant can find meaning in being engaged and involved. Or this ties in the conversation you and I had last week. I want us to be doing meaningful stuff, but I don't want 30 people doing meaningful stuff. I want to have our doing stuff that's meaningful for the community at large. And I want to have it be the kinds of things where there's vehicles for all of our congregants to be involved and feel as though they played a part in it. Because I think in that regard, by helping community outside, we'll do a great job building community inside also. Because and my ulterior motive here about all this stuff is to build more interior community.
I hear you. And I'm right there with you. So we'll see what we can create.
Thank you, Lori. I'm sure you will.
With a little help from our friends.
No blackmail necessary.
All right. So our next question comes from Philip Cantor.
Philip Cantor, that is my son.
Hey, Dad.
Hi, Phil. How you doing, sweetie?
Doing very well. So we got to, you touched on this a little bit earlier. We're running through your educational thing. And one of the things that you said at the end there was, I hope I'm not done learning yet. And it's one of the things I've always admired about you throughout life here is that you haven't been static. You haven't stayed in place and you haven't been happy with what you know. You've always looked to learn more and to look around the corner a little bit more and to figure out like, it's a good question. Like, let me figure out the answer to that. What's something you're excited about learning?
Something I'm excited about learning. So it's pretty mundane stuff. My excitement these days for a bunch of this, well, it's not all mundane. So as time goes on, I want to get my arms better around the whole issue of systemic racism and how as a society we can deal with that issue. And yet, as you know, Phil, from our conversations, there's a huge chunk of me that wants us to deal with that issue in ways in which the average person from the majority can be involved, engaged, and accept, the minimum, accept. So I think that there's a huge challenge there. And I don't want to take another 100 years for the love of Jesus. I don't want that to happen. So that's one thing. That's a substantive thing that I'm curious about. Then I must have 10 baseball questions I want to get the answers to. Things that I'm wondering about in terms of how have fourth starter ERAs changed in the last 20 years? I mean, do fifth starters actually really start more than 15 games a year anymore? I have all those kinds of stupid questions I'm wondering about that are all baseball related kinds of things I just want to know more about.
Will the Dodgers ever fix the bullpen?
Probably in my mind's eye, the answer to that's going to be no. Whether they have it fixed or not, I'm never going to think otherwise.
There's another Dodgers question on this list. Tom McKenna, do you want to ask your question? Is he able to?
Sure thing. Hey, David.
Hey, Tom.
So yeah, it's a timely question, So a future World Series, hopefully not too long, features the Dodgers against the Guardians. Who do you root for?
Dodgers. That's an easy one.
Oh.
I am wearing for the, I made a costume change here. You can't
I saw it.
But I'm wearing my Brooklyn Dodgers t-shirt now. The first sports team I ever rooted for was the Dodgers. They were already in Los Angeles, but I didn't start rooting for them until I had moved from Brooklyn to Queens, and the Dodgers had moved from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. A little bit longer distance, I grant, but they were the first team I rooted for, and I've been a Dodger fan for, I'm going to show my age, over 60 years, and so they've been the team I've been rooting for. Now, Tom, against anybody else, I'm rooting for the Guardians. Let me be clear about this. You put them up against my Dodgers, I'm looking for a 7-game series. I want the Dodgers to win. I'm not going to cry crocodile tears if the Guardians win. I'm looking for the Dodgers to win that one.
So that probably would be the only time you and I would be rooting for different teams.
But Tom, I'd go to a game with you anyway.
That's right. I always appreciate it, David.
Okay.
And before we wrap up this section, Jack Ullman had a little comment, which he states, I want you to know that UUCC Live is much better when listened to with nerve blocks and serious narcotics. What type of narcotics, Jack?
That's pretty funny.
Well,
All right,
thanks,
thank you for
David.
answering these questions, David.
Thank you all for asking them. Thanks for all being here.
Hey, gang. Let's give a major league round of applause to our producers, Carol Gay and Liz Kantor, who for this whole show have supported us so much. Will and David and I, we do the easy stuff. Liz and Carol do everything behind the scenes. They're at every meeting. They make the music work. They make the slides work. They make Zoom work. So thank you so much, Liz and Carol. And David, thank you for being our special guest tonight.
You're welcome.
We want to invite everybody before we close. You know, we always have a little time after our final show where folks are welcome to come and join us to as a little mini reception. We want to invite you all to stay with us after the final wrap-up song, pour yourself a cold bevy, celebrate the series finale of UUCC Zoom-In Live. To close the show, Will and I are gonna hand the mic back to you, David.
So thanks, Claudia. So, you know, when Carol Gay and I hatched the idea for this show, we did it because we understood the importance of being together in real time in community, of having a large group of our fellow congregants together on a routine basis, just to be together. And at the time, we didn't have anything that provided that opportunity. Well, we're sitting here now, a little bit more than a year later, and I think we kind of did what we set out to do. We've had the opportunity to be together in community, in real time, and along the way, we learned a bunch more about a number of our fellow congregants and some of our staff. We heard some great music, and we got some laughs, mostly thanks to Jack Ullman. And we're at a point now where we've been able to worship together live in real time for several months now. And it looks like there's a real shot that we'll be able to continue to do so, even when the weather gets colder. So, like I mentioned early on, while there's a part of me that is sad to wrap up this adventure, there's another part of me that's really looking forward to seeing what comes next. So I want to thank you all for attending tonight, whether it's your first show, your 26th, or something in between. I appreciate all of your comments and words of support during the last year. I want to personally thank Carol and Liz for producing all of these shows, and Will and Claudia for carrying me across 26 episodes, along with an earlier assist from Jenna Bradbourne. And of course, I want to thank Jack Ullman for being ever present and being the funniest part of the show. You know, we gave them an impossible task, which is to not make me not look so terrible on a show-by-show basis. And I think you'd have to agree they really succeeded. And truly, for you guys, I'm truly blessed to have you all in my life. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank all of our guests over the past year. You know, I highlighted one thing from Don Stimpert, but really everybody provided us with some interesting tales about their background. And at least for me, I got a thing or two to think about after everybody appeared. I'd also like to thank the members of my family who are here with us tonight. So you heard a hi from my sister Susan. You heard from my faux brother Don Schwartz, and from my son Philip. But I also have my nieces Karen and Deborah here tonight. Hi, sweeties, glad you're here. Thanks so much for showing up. And my cousin Bruce is here as well. Thank you, Bruce. Glad you're here too. And my nephew Scott is here as well. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate you guys all showing up. And of course, you know what I'm going to say last, of course. Last, and goodness knows, but first in all things, I'd like to thank my wife, Mary Ellen McNulty, who, when I brought up the crazy idea of my hosting a talk show, said, that's a great idea. When will you start it? When many other people would have said, are you out of your bleeping mind? You got a face that's made for radio and a voice that's made to be muted. Just one more instance of the proof I have that I have the best life partner in the world. Thank you, Mary Ellen. I love you so much. So I'll be hanging around a little bit post-show if you want to chat for a minute. My family of blood, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person in October and November in person. my extended family, it's all of the rest of you guys. I look forward to seeing you in person real soon. Thank you, everybody. And from my deepest heart, thank you and good night.
Well, we can't hear you. I don't know why.
Said you can't hear me.
Oh, now I can. Yes.
That was an amazing monologue, better than SNL.
Love you.
I want to say, I think that the final slide that's going to be up while our final song is going on is a word cloud made from your testimonials. So you can see the kind words that popped up in many of the testimonials in this little word cloud. Will, do you want to cue the final wrap-up song?
So per David's request, we decided to go with the original Shaft theme by one and only Isaac Hayes. And per David's words, he told me that because the song for me reminds me of him, but you didn't hear that from me.
Thanks all. Hopefully we'll see you later in the show. Or later after the show, I guess.
All right, everybody, be easy.
Good night.
Everybody.
Good night.
dick, that's a sex machine to all the chicks. You're damn right. Who is the man that would risk his neck for his brother, man? Can you dig it? Who's the cat that won't cop out when there's danger all about? Right on. You see, this cat Shaft is a bad mother. Shut your mouth. What I'm talking about, Shaft? Then we can do it. He's a complicated man, but no one understands him but his woman.
John Shaft.
was a good song. I like that one.
The people are just getting back in from being elevated to panelist.
So David, I somehow never quite got around to sending anything in, even though I had it on my, okay, I need to get this in on time. But thank you for